We're back. So instead of getting a new Milwaukee grinder, we went ahead and went to Menards and picked up another Master Force. And it was an even exchange since I told them what happened. I said, the grinders burn up. I said, it's your guys' product. If you would exchange it for me, I'd really appreciate it. And they did. They said it's no problem, and they've even made some changes to it. Now, I will say there's a couple things that I don't like. Whenever you fire it up, it takes a minute to get going. I'll just show you right here. Now, see, normally on a grinder, it doesn't take nearly as long. You don't hear that hum before it gets going. So I'm still gonna get the Milwaukee, but it's pretty expensive and I'm gonna have to save up for it a little bit. But anyway, on that note, I went ahead and I buffed out the welds. And right now we're gonna get our cross member in here in the bottom, and that just helps support the weight of all the dirt that we're gonna be putting in there. So instead of bowing or sagging, it really can't. Because once you get this piece in here, instead of it bowing, it'll try to pull these ends in. And we got 2 inch by 1/4 angle, and that ain't going nowhere, not with the kind of weight that we're gonna put in it. And then after I get that put on, we'll put our feet on. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the 2 inch flat stock and just cut 2 by 2 squares. And it'll fit over this perfect. And then I'll weld it inside and out. And then I'll buff out those welds on the outside. And then I'll give it a nice round over too with the tiger paw. And that being said, we'll be right back. All right. So I had a viewer, Wild Cubing, that asked, how do you put on tacks? So what I've got here is this is our cross piece. And you measure from here to here and here to here. And you make sure that it all turns out the same. So what I did was, to get a rough idea first, was we've got 36 inches from outside to outside. And what you do is you divide that by 2, that's 18. So you make your mark, you know that this is 2 inches wide. You go 1 inch on either side of it. Then you can put your piece in there, and right there, measure it up again, like I showed you, right there to there, and there to there. Then after it's perfectly level, or perfectly square, you will, you'll take your machine. Let me get this to give you a visual. You'll light up, and then come down, and you'll just make a tiny spot weld, and that's a tack. So thanks for the question there, Wild, and hopefully that explains it a little better. All right, guys. So what we've got here is a fence picket, and this is a 1x6 by 6 foot long. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut the pieces to fit on the bottom here, and we're just going to lay those in there. Those don't need to get bolted down because the other ones will hold it. So we need to take a measurement from your widest point. So go from the edge of the weld to the edge of the weld on the inside, and then We'll subtract 1/8 of an inch to get it a little bit of play, and then we'll cut it up. And we'll need 3 pieces. Should be perfect for 3 pieces long. So let me get my tape measure, and we'll do that. Okay. So at the bottom here, I'll hold the edge of the tape to the outside of the weld, and it looks like we got 35 3/8. So we'll subtract another 1/8, and that makes it 35 1/4. That's what we'll mark over here is 35 1/4. And then take your square, run your line all the way across there. And then I'm going to use a circular saw to cut this. You can use a miter saw, that'd actually be better if you've got one. I don't have one, not yet. And then I'll cut this, and then I'll do the same thing. And we ought to be able to cut this dog ear off and still have enough board to play with. The reason why I bought fence pickets was because they're so much cheaper. These were like, I want to say about $4 a piece, which is still high, but with lumber the way it is, see, a regular 1x6 by 6 foot long was going to be like $25. So it just makes sense to get the fence pickets. They're a little bit rough sawn, but I can deal with that. I ain't spending no $25 a board, because you're going to need about 6 of them. You're going to need about 6 of these, and that'll add up real quick. So let's get these cut, and then I'll jump to where we're putting them in the bottom, and I'll show you how to make our pieces coming up, where to drill the holes at. All right, so we got our pieces cut, and you'll notice that you'll have spaces in between them, and that's for water drainage. It's supposed to be like that. Now, to figure out where we drill our holes on the side to mount these boards, for the first one, we're going to measure our board, and it is 5 1/4. So you take that, divided by 2, which is 2 7/8. Then you come down on your piece of angle, 2 7/8, and then you'll come over from the outside 1 inch, because you got 2 by 2 angle. And then that's where your first hole will go. You're only going to have 2 screws, or 2 bolts in each board. And after that, what you want to do is stack up these 3 boards, and then we'll measure how much we got to the top of the angle. And I've got 1 inch. So what I'm going to do is take 1 inch divided by 3, roughly. It's a little over 5/16. So I'll take that, what was this measurement? 5 1/4 plus 5/16. Then I'll measure down from our first hole, and that'll be our second hole, and then we'll do that one more time, and that'll be the last one. And then those holes will stay consistent on every side of the angle. So you'll end up drilling 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24 holes. And we're going to put 1/4 inch bolts through. So you'll want just a hair bigger than 1/4. That way you got some play to go in there. All right, well, let me get this laid on its side, and I'll get the drill out, and we'll start marking our holes. All right, so we got her laid on its side, and I got to thinking, I think that it would look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing if we put the bolts, because I'm using carriage bolts, if we put our bolts a little bit closer to this side here. So instead of going in the center like my original plan was, I think I'm going to bring it a 1/2 inch from the inside. And here's a carriage bolt. If you guys ain't seen one, it's one that don't have a top to it. It's just rounded. And they're going to look like giant rivets in there. It's going to look really good, I think. Let's go ahead and lay out our first hole. So we know that our board is 5 1/4 inches wide. We're going to take that divided by 2, which is 2 5/8. That's where we're going to put our first mark. So from the top here down 2 5/8. And then I've got my square adjusted to a 1/2 inch. Go right up to it. And there's where our first bolt's going to go through. And it's makes things a lot easier if you use a pilot bit first. In this case, I'm going to be using a 1/8 inch bit. And then I'll jump up to 3/8, and that'll give us a little play if we want to move one of them boards around a little bit. So let's talk safety for a minute. When you think safety, you think gloves, safety glasses, stuff like that. Well, when you're drilling, safety glasses is a must, but I wouldn't be wearing gloves because maybe not with this 1/8 inch bit, but if you got a big bit on a drill and your hand slips, well, that glove's going for a ride and your hand's going with it, and it'll break all your fingers, and it's a mess. So if I was you, I drill without gloves, and as soon as you're done drilling, put them back on. And I think it's a little safer that way. Now these bits that I'm using here, they're Bosch, and they make a pretty good bit. I found I don't really have to use oil with it. They're made for steel. I don't really have to use oil with it, and they cut just fine. And that's a major plus for me because I hate putting oil down and getting that stuff all over me, because it always happens every time I do. But anyways, we'll drill our first hole, and then we'll talk about where to put the next one. So we've determined that our board is 5 1/4 inches wide. Now, if you'll remember, we had an inch gap at the top when we stacked them all 3 on top of each other, and I want to spread that out evenly. It comes out to about a 5/16 gap. So we'll take our 5 1/4 and add 5/16. That is 5 9/16. So we're going to come off of this first hole, come down 5 9/16 and make another one. And then we'll do it again. 5 9/16, we'll make another one. And then you'll repeat that process through the hole each side. Then I'll drill these out and I'll show you a cool trick. Here's our 3 holes that we drilled. And then if you take your square, put it on top here, line it up with your holes, just make a mark in the center of each hole. And you can put that on each side and you'll be good to go. All right, guys, we got the holes drilled, and now we're going to paint it before we stick any wood in there. What I'm using is Rust-Oleum, and it's satin crayon black. So I don't want a real glossy finish just because I don't. You can use whatever you want. If you want to paint her blue, paint her blue. We're gonna do this and then let her dry, and then come tomorrow, we'll put the wood in. Definitely do this outside because you don't want your overspray to be all over everything in the garage. And be sure to get inside them those holes that we drilled. That's why we drilled them first before we painted. Because you don't want any chance of rust anywhere on this. I'm probably gonna put a couple coats on here. And then I'm leaving about 6-8 inches from the bottom. That way, after all this dries, I can turn it over, paint the bottom, and then turn it back over, and we'll be good. We'll start putting wood in it and dirt. Anyways, I'll see you guys tomorrow.